Call came at 1:52 in the morning. Not my phone. My son's phone, ringing in the guest room down the hall. The one he'd been sleeping in for the past 3 weeks since he moved back home after his divorce. I heard him answer it, heard the low murmur of his voice. Then silence, then his footsteps in the hall, stopping outside my bedroom door. "Dad, you need to come downstairs." I was already awake. I had been awake since 11, sitting at my desk in the dark, going through the files on my laptop one more time. Not because I needed to. I had memorized every document, every timestamp, every dollar amount weeks ago. I went through them because it steadied me. Because what was coming required absolute calm. And calm, for me, has always come from preparation. I closed the laptop, set it in the fireproof lockbox under my desk, and walked downstairs. My son was standing in the kitchen in his t-shirt and boxers, phone still in his hand, face pale in a way I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral 6 years ago. There were 2 men at my front door. I could see their shapes through the frosted glass panel beside the frame. Dark jackets. One of them had a flashlight. "Dad, they're from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They have a warrant." I looked at him for a moment. He was 34 years old, still looked like the boy who used to fall asleep on the couch watching baseball with me. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Go back upstairs, son." "Dad, I'll handle this." "Go on." He didn't move right away. That's the thing about raising a kid who becomes a lawyer. They don't just follow instructions anymore. They assess situations. He looked at me with those sharp eyes of his, the ones he got from his mother, and I could see him trying to read something in my face. He didn't find what he was looking for, because I wasn't giving it to him. "Not yet. I'll explain everything in the morning," I said. "I promise. Go upstairs." He went. I opened the front door. There were 3 of them, not 2. 2 special agents from IRS Criminal Investigation, badges out, and 1 local county sheriff's deputy hanging back near the porch steps like he was there for procedural backup and didn't particularly want to be. The lead agent was a woman, late 40s, dark coat, hair pulled back, professional in the way that people are professional when they've done something unpleasant so many times it no longer feels unpleasant. "Mr. Sutton?" "Conrad Sutton." "That's me. Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Please step outside." She kept talking, the familiar recitation of rights that I had heard before, in different circumstances, in a different life. I let the words wash over me and looked past her at the driveway. A dark SUV was parked behind my truck. The neighbor's porch light had come on across the street, and standing at the edge of my own front walk, wrapped in a cardigan she must have grabbed on her way out of the side entrance of the house, was my daughter-in-law. My former daughter-in-law, I should say. She and my son had separated 8 months ago, but she still had a key, had been coming and going from the property to collect the last of her things. What she was doing here at 2 in the morning, I didn't need to ask. I already knew. She had made the call. She had told them when to come, how to come, what they would find. She was watching me with an expression I can only describe as careful triumph. Like a person who has bet everything on a single hand and is watching the cards turn over one by one. She thought she was watching me fall apart. She had no idea who I was. "Do you understand your rights as I've explained them?" "I do." "Please turn around, sir." The handcuffs were standard issue. My wrists are thicker than they used to be. 63 years of living will do that, and the left one pinched slightly against the bone. I didn't say anything about it. I had been in worse situations with worse restraints in worse countries, and I had learned a long time ago that complaining about discomfort is a form of surrender. I wasn't surrendering anything that night. The SUV smelled like coffee and vinyl. I sat in the back and watched my house disappear as we pulled down the street. One light on upstairs. My son, awake, probably already courting his law partner. I almost smiled. I had taught him well. The ride to the Federal Processing Center took 40 minutes. I spent them running through the sequence of events in my head. checking it the way a pilot checks instruments before takeoff. Methodical, thorough, looking for anything I might have missed. I hadn't missed anything. I had spent 11 months preparing for this night. 11 months of documentation, of patience, of watching the people who were trying to destroy me and making sure they had every reason to believe they were succeeding. There is a particular discipline required for that kind of operation. You have to suppress the instinct to act, to confront, to defend yourself out loud. You have to let the lie stand while you build the truth underneath it. Most people can't do it. Most people can't do it. Most people show their hand. I am not most people. Let me tell you what I am. My nephew stood in Rome, and he told to Spankus fix a mouse in Dayton, Ohio. The second of 4 children, to a man who drove a delivery truck and a woman who kept the books for 3 different small businesses in our neighborhood. We were not poor, but we were careful. Money was discussed openly in our house, tracked in a ledger my mother kept on the kitchen counter, accounted for in a way that made me understand from an early age that financial order is a form of dignity. I was good with numbers. Frighteningly good, my teacher said, in the way that adults say frightening when they mean something they don't entirely understand. I won the state mathematics competition twice, got a full scholarship to Ohio State, and by the time I was 22, I had a degree in accounting and an offer from one of the 4 largest accounting firms in the country. I didn't take it. Instead, I took a meeting with a man named Howick, who introduced himself as being with the Treasury Department, and left it at that. He found me through my thesis advisor, who apparently had a habit of passing along exceptional students to people he described only as government contacts. Howick sat across from me in a conference room and asked me a series of questions that had nothing to do with tax law or audit procedures. He asked how I felt about travel, how I felt about ambiguity, how I felt about keeping secrets from people I cared about. I thought about those questions for 72 hours. Then I called him back and said yes. What followed was 26 years with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and, for a significant portion of that time, in coordination with agencies whose names I am still not at liberty to discuss in any detail. What I can tell you is that I spent the better part of 3 decades tracking money, illegal money, the kind that moves through shell companies and offshore accounts and cryptocurrency platforms and dummy non-profits. The kind that funds things that people in comfortable suburban houses prefer not to think about. I was good at finding it. I was exceptional at following it to its source. I was arrested 11 times in the course of my career. Never charged. 7 of those arrests were deliberate, part of cover operations. 4 were genuine mistakes by local law enforcement who didn't have clearance to access my actual file. In each case, the situation resolved itself quickly once the right people were contacted. I was used to the process. I retired in 2019. 68 years old, a government pension, a house in Virginia that my wife and I had bought in 1994 and slowly filled with the life we'd built together. My wife passed in 2018, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. The retirement that followed felt less like freedom and more like the quiet after a door closes. I threw myself into consulting work, private sector clients, financial forensics for law firms and insurance companies. It kept my mind occupied. It kept the silence from getting too loud. My son moved back home 3 weeks before this story begins, after his marriage ended. His wife, a woman I had known for 9 years and genuinely liked until I didn't, had been having an affair with her business partner for the better part of 2 years. When my son found out and filed for divorce, she shifted from hurt to calculating with a speed that told me the hurt had never been entirely genuine. She hired an aggressive attorney. She made claims about marital assets that were creative, to say the least, and somewhere in the process of picking through my son's finances, she apparently went looking at mine as well. That was her mistake. And it was a significant one. She found the investment accounts, 3 of them, totaling a little over $1.8 million, accumulated over 26 years of government hazard pay, overseas allowances, and the kind of performance bonuses that don't appear in standard payroll records, because the work that earned them doesn't appear in standard personnel files. She also found, because she was thorough, the consulting income from the past 4 years, which was substantial and which, for reasons I will not go into detail about here, was structured in a way that requires specific context to understand legally. She didn't have that context to understand legally. She didn't have that context. She didn't try to get it. What she did instead was hire a forensic accountant, or someone who called himself one, who produced a report claiming that the structure of my accounts was consistent with tax evasion and money laundering. She took that report to the IRS. She packaged it with a letter from her attorney outlining the alleged irregularities, included a selection of bank statements she had obtained through my son's shared accounts, and submitted the whole thing as what she described as a concerned citizen's report. I found out in January, 3 months before the arrest, through a contact at Treasury I've known for 30 years. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, "Conrad, someone filed a whistleblower complaint against you. I'm not supposed to tell you that, but I'm telling you." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat in my office for about 40 minutes looking at the wall. Then I opened my laptop and started building the case that would eventually dismantle hers. The processing center smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. A young agent with a crew cut and an expression of professional disinterest walked me through intake, took my watch and wallet, had me sit in a chair against a beige wall while he ran my information through the system. I watched him type, watched him hit enter, watched him hit enter, watched the page load. He leaned forward, read something. His head tilted slightly to the right, the way people's heads tilt when they encounter something that doesn't compute. He typed something else, waited, read again. His jaw tightened. He picked up his desk phone and called someone without looking away from the screen. "Sir, I need you to come to intake. Now. I understand the hour." "Yes, sir. I really do need you to come down." He hung up and looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down, with the careful expression of someone recalibrating their assumptions. "Mr. Sutton, can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" I looked at him. "Coffee would be good," I said. "Black." He almost got up before he caught himself, seemed to remember something about protocol, and sat back down. He stared at the screen again. He did not look bored anymore. The regional director arrived in 11 minutes. I know because I was watching the clock on the wall. He was a compact man in his early 60s, silver at the temples, moving through the door with the purposeful energy of someone who does not appreciate being called in at 2:30 in the morning, but is too professional to say so. He looked at the screen over the young agent's shoulder and went very still. "Mr. Sutton," he said, pulling up a chair across from me. His name tag said Pressman. "I've reviewed your file." I nodded. "Your classification level has triggered a hold on this arrest pending contact with federal oversight." He paused. "Are you able to tell me anything about the nature of that classification?" "Not in this room," I said. He studied me for a long moment. "In 30 years," he said finally, "I have processed exactly 2 cases with this kind of federal flag on the subject's file. One was a sitting federal judge who had been arrested by mistake." He stopped, looked at me. "What are you?" "I'm retired," I said. He sat back. "Someone is on their way. I've been instructed to offer you every courtesy until they arrive and to make no further moves on the warrant pending their authorization." "That sounds right," I said. The coffee arrived. It was not good coffee, but I have spent nights in circumstances where coffee of any quality was a significant luxury, and I drank it without complaint. The man who arrived at 4:15 in the morning had flown in from Washington. I recognized him when he walked through the door. Though he had aged since the last time I'd seen him, we both had. Deputy Inspector General Whitmore, Department of the Treasury. He had been my supervisor's supervisor for the last 6 years of my active career. He sat down across from me in the small conference room where I'd been moved, looked at me for a moment, and then said something that, under other circumstances, might have made me laugh. "Of all the intakes in all the processing centers in all of Virginia." "Eugene," I said. "Conrad." He shook his head. They told me the name, and I thought it had to be a coincidence. Tell me this was deliberate, all of it." He leaned back in his chair, the way men do when they're shifting from surprise into assessment. "Walk me through it." I did. All 11 months of it. The whistleblower complaint, the forensic accountant's report, the methodology my former daughter-in-law had used to structure her case against me, the flaws in that case, and the counter-documentation I had spent nearly a year assembling. I told him about the recordings, the paper trail, the communications I had obtained legally through my consulting firm's security protocols, which have substantially more reach than most people assume. The account structures he called fraudulent, I said, are consistent with compensation arrangements specifically authorized under Treasury Directive 84-77, which governs payment to certain long-term assets who transition to private sector work. If her forensic accountant had that directive, which is not classified, just obscure, he would have known that. He either didn't look for it or chose not to. Or was told not to, Whitmore said. That's what the record shows. He was quiet for a moment. The woman who filed this complaint, your son's wife, separated. Her attorney helped structure the filing to maximize the appearance of misconduct. I have emails. Where are they? Encrypted on a server at my consulting firm. I can have them due within the hour. He nodded slowly, with the expression of a man who has seen many things in his career, but still occasionally finds himself impressed. You know, he said, most people in your position, facing a federal arrest warrant, would have called a lawyer the minute they found out the complaint had been filed, would have spent the last 3 months fighting it through official channels. Official channels would have taken 2 years and left my son's divorce settlement in limbo the entire time, I said. This way is cleaner. This way, Whitmore said. You arranged your own federal arrest and triggered a classification review that is now going to result in a full investigation of the people who filed the complaint. Yes. At 63 years old. 63 years old? 63 is not what it used to be, I said. He almost smiled. No. He stood up. I'm going to need your full deposition, access to your documentation, and a signed authorization for us to act on the evidence you've gathered. In exchange, the warrant will be suspended pending review and ultimately vacated. The filing party will be referred for investigation on charges of filing a fraudulent government complaint, obstruction, and potentially conspiracy, depending on what the emails show about the attorney's involvement. That's what I expected, I said. He extended his hand. Good to see you, Conrad. I wish it were different circumstances. I shook it. These are fine circumstances, I said. I've had worse. The team arrived at my former daughter-in-law's apartment at 6:45 that morning. I know the timeline because Whitmore sent me a text, which is not standard procedure, but Eugene has never been particularly concerned with standard procedure when it comes to people he respects. 6:47 warrant executed. Subject present 6052, device seizure complete 7007, emails located on personal laptop. Content consistent with your documentation 7031. Subject in custody, the attorney, a man named Greaves who had a corner office in a firm downtown and a reputation for aggressive tactics in high-asset divorces, was picked up at his home at 7:15. His paralegal, who had apparently helped draft the fraudulent accountant's report and had the good sense to have kept every version of every draft on a shared drive, was interviewed voluntarily and agreed to cooperate before 8 in the morning. I was home by 8:30. My son was in the kitchen. He had made a full breakfast, the kind he used to make on Sunday mornings when he was a teenager and was trying to apologize for something without saying the words. Eggs, toast, bacon, orange juice from actual oranges. He looked up when I walked in, read my face for a second, then looked back down at the pan. You want to tell me what happened? He said. I sat down at the kitchen table. I said, I need to tell you some things about who I am. Things I should have told you a long time ago. He turned off the burner, sat down across from me. I started at the beginning. He's a lawyer, my son, and lawyers are trained to receive information without interrupting it. to let a story complete itself before they start pulling at the threads. He sat across from me for 90 minutes and listened while I told him about Harwick and the Treasury Department and the 26 years that followed. About the operations I was permitted to describe in general terms and the ones I could only acknowledge existed without providing details. About the accounts, what they were, how they'd been structured, why they looked the way they looked to someone who didn't understand what they were looking at. About his wife, about what she had done and why, and about the 11 months I had spent building the case that would hold her accountable for it. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Dad," he said finally, "I knew something was off. I knew you were too calm about everything. I was calm because there was nothing to be worried about." He shook his head. "That's not why you were calm, and you know it." He was right. I was calm because calm was what I had been trained to be. Because in situations of genuine threat, panic is the enemy of effective action, and I had spent decades learning to keep panic at a distance. But there had also been moments, in the quiet of my office late at night, going through those files, when I had felt something colder than calm, when I had thought about what it meant that this woman, who had sat at my Thanksgiving table and laughed at my bad jokes and accepted a quilt my wife had made for her when she and my son got married, had decided to try to destroy me for financial leverage. Those moments had not required much effort to manage. I have experienced genuine betrayal, the kind that comes with physical danger, more times than I can comfortably count. What she had done was calculated and small and motivated entirely by money. It was disappointing, in a way that had less to do with hurt feelings, and more to do with the recognition that some people will always prioritize what they can get over what they've been given. She had been given a great deal. She chose the other thing. The proceedings took 8 months. My former daughter-in-law faced charges of filing a fraudulent federal complaint, conspiracy to obstruct a government investigation, and wire fraud for the use of electronic communications in the scheme. Greaves, her attorney, faced disbarment proceedings in addition to criminal charges. The forensic accountant who had prepared the false report, when investigators started pulling at his professional history, turned out to have done this kind of work before, produced favorable findings for clients in high-asset divorces on 3 previous occasions in exchange for undisclosed fees. Those cases were reopened. The structure collapsed in the way that structures always collapse when they're built on a false premise, suddenly, completely, and with significant collateral damage to everyone who had been standing inside it. My former daughter-in-law pleaded guilty to the federal complaint charge and 1 count of wire fraud. 9 years. Her attorney negotiated a cooperation agreement and received a reduced sentence of 4 years in addition to losing his license permanently. The accountant cooperated immediately and received 3 years of supervised probation. My son was in the courtroom for the sentencing. I had told him he didn't need to be there, that there was nothing he needed to witness for closure, that some conclusions are better absorbed in private. He came anyway. He sat next to me in the gallery and watched his former wife stand before the judge and accept the consequences of what she had chosen to do. Afterward, in the parking garage, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Did she know? About who you were? About any of it?" "No," I said. "She thought I was a retired accountant with suspicious savings." He nodded. "That's what got her. That's what always gets people," I said. "They make decisions based on who they think someone is, and they forget that they're only seeing the surface." We walked to the car. He unlocked it but didn't get in. Stood there with his hand on the door. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. "I don't mean about the case. I mean before. All of it. Who you were." I looked at him. He's a tall man now, taller than I am, which still surprises me occasionally when I'm not expecting it. He has his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, and a particular quality of patience that belongs entirely to him. "Your mother knew," I said. "Not everything, but the broad shape of it. She knew from early on, and she made a decision to trust me with it, and I will be grateful to her for that for the rest of my life. As for you, I was trying to protect you from a weight that I didn't think you needed to carry. And now you're old enough to carry it and wise enough to know what to do with it." He thought about that. "Does it change anything?" I asked. "Between us?" He shook his head. "No." He paused. "Actually, it explains a lot." "Like what?" "Like why you're the calmest person I've ever met in a crisis. Like why you always knew when I was lying to you as a kid, even when I was absolutely certain I'd gotten away with it." I smiled. "You were never as subtle as you thought." He got in the car. I got in the passenger side. We drove home. That was 14 months ago. He's still living with me, which was supposed to be temporary and has become something neither of us is in any hurry to change. We have dinner together most nights. We watch baseball on Sundays. He asks me questions occasionally, careful questions about the parts of my career that I'm permitted to discuss, and I answer them as honestly as I can. I took the consulting arrangement that Whitmore offered through Treasury, 2 days a month. I review financial intelligence for a task force working on digital currency crime, which is where money laundering has moved in the past decade, and where the talent pool for people who understand both old-school financial architecture and new platform behavior is genuinely thin. It's interesting work. It keeps me connected to a world I was good at without asking me to go back to living inside it. I'm 63 years old. My wife is gone. My son is rebuilding his life at the same kitchen table where he ate cereal and argued about homework, and grew from a boy into a man who I am genuinely proud to know. I have a pension and a consulting fee and a house that is full, finally, of quiet, that feels earned rather than empty. Some mornings I sit with my coffee on the back porch and think about the night they put the handcuffs on me, about the look on my former daughter-in-law's face, that careful triumph, the bet she thought she had placed on a sure thing. She had looked at my life and seen a retired accountant with money he couldn't explain, and a son who was distracted by his own pain. She had looked at the surface and assumed that was all there was. People do that. They look at a 63-year-old man in a quiet house in Virginia, and they see limitation, diminishment, a person who has largely already happened. They calculate what they can take. They don't ask what's underneath. That's the mistake. That's always the mistake. I spent 26 years in the dark following money that other people believed was invisible, dismantling operations that their architects believed were impenetrable. I learned to be patient. I learned to wait. I learned that the most effective response to someone who is trying to destroy you is not noise and not confrontation, but the slow, careful accumulation of the truth until the truth is the only thing left in the room. She thought she was coming for a retired accountant. She had no idea. I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had you figured out? Have you ever had to hold everything together, stay calm, say nothing, while someone tried to take what was yours and wait for exactly the right moment to let the truth speak for itself? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially anyone who has ever been counted out before the game was finished. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you then. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that night. Not in any abstract way, not as philosophy, just as a practical matter, the way a man thinks about it when he has lived long enough to watch actions complete their full arc and land exactly where they were always going to land. My daughter-in-law made a choice. She looked at my life, made a series of assumptions about what she was looking at, and decided to use those assumptions as a weapon. What she didn't account for was that assumptions are only as good as the information behind them. Hers were built on a surface. She had never bothered to ask what was underneath it, and that incuriosity cost her everything. That's not luck. That's not fate. That's the simple, mechanical consequence of choosing to act on incomplete information because you were in too much of a hurry or too certain of yourself to look further. Greed does that to people. It narrows the field of vision. It makes the thing you want to look so large that you stop seeing what's standing between you and it. I don't feel satisfaction about what happened to her. I want to be honest about that, because I think there's a version of this story where the ending feels like a win, and I'm not sure that's the right way to hold it. What I feel is something quieter, a kind of recognition. She set something in motion that she couldn't stop once it started, and the reason she couldn't stop it is that she had underestimated the resistance she would meet. That's a lesson I learned early and watched prove itself true for 26 years in work that had much higher stakes than a divorce settlement. The thing about integrity, and I mean that word in its structural sense, the way a building has integrity, is that it holds under pressure. I spent 11 months under considerable pressure. The pressure of knowing what was coming. The pressure of not reacting. The pressure of watching someone try to dismantle what I had built and saying nothing, doing nothing visible, while I built the response they would never see coming. That required patience, which is a form of discipline. It required clarity about what the actual goal was, which is a form of intelligence, and it required a decision, made early and held to without wavering, about what kind of man I was going to be in that situation. That decision is a form of character. Those three things together, discipline, intelligence, and character, are not qualities you're born with. They are qualities you build, slowly, through choices made over years. Most of them small, most of them made when no one is watching. My son is learning that now, I think. He sat across from me at that kitchen table and heard the broad shape of a life he hadn't known about, and what he said afterward was not what I expected. He didn't say he was angry I had kept it from him. He said it explained a lot about the way I moved through hard things, about the way I waited. I hope that's the thing he carries forward. Not the story, not the specific facts of what happened, but the understanding underneath it. That the long way around is sometimes the only way that actually works. That restraint is not weakness. That the most powerful response to someone who is trying to take something from you is often to simply know more than they do, wait longer than they expect, and let the truth arrive on its own terms. It always does. In my experience, it always does.